You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
All right, excited for this one, Mike. Thank you for joining me. You've been on the podcast before, but for those that may not have heard that previous episode, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what it is that you do in this OT cybersecurity world.
No, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it, Aaron, as always.
Yep.
And for me, my name is Mike. I am in my day job. I get to work and design security for some of the world's largest industrial control environments. I get to really work with some of the world's best engineers in the control system space. So I'm very, very privileged there. And then outside of the day job, a lot of it is being able to take the information I learned there and from others in the community and being able to make that, I think, a little bit more accessible to folks, whether it's on YouTube with a free course around how to get started in industrial control, cybersecurity, which is really a focus for me. It really just sharing with people and helping not only bring new folks in to the community, but also for folks that want to learn more about ICS and OT cybersecurity, why it's important, why asset and owner operators, or they kind of get stuck, right? And a lot of them don't have a lot of resources either to build their programs and might not know where to start. So a lot of my goals is to help, not only bring, new people into the community, but also to help, I guess, essentially build up or strengthen those environments out there that already exist where, again, especially for those that they're not like a Shell or a BP with larger budgets, they're probably small mom and pop shops or, medium-sized organizations that they just don't have all those resources and don't even know where to start. So that's a big part of, what I share on YouTube and on LinkedIn.
And it's such a valuable and needed thing, right? Is not everybody is Duke, not everybody's Shell, not everybody's FedEx, not everybody's Amazon, right? There's varying levels of budgets and complexity and staff, like all those things, and you have to start somewhere. Like there's plenty of organizations that are in the beginning stages and they don't know where to start, or they've started and maybe they've gotten to the 10-yard line and they don't know how to get it, that much further and what's that low hanging fruit and all those things are valuable, and coming from, working at a Big Four, and nothing against the Big Four. I loved working there. I'm glad I have that in my, that feather in my cap. But at the same time, some of these smaller organizations can't pay a Big Four to come in and advise them, right? They just can't. They can't even pay, smaller boutique firms. Like they just don't have that budget or staff. So sometimes they have to do the best with what they've got. And sometimes I'm an engineer. Maybe I'm the smartest engineer in the world at my controls and automation, but that's a different skill set than cybersecurity. And that's the thing that a lot of the times you and I are talking to those really capable, amazing engineers and trying to give them some of the knowledge they need to kind of in this realm that they're not from. They didn't come, that's not their training. They've been doing this for a long time, but the cyber thing is different. And many times it gets bolted on because they're the smartest guy or girl in the room. They're the ones that are left with hey, you do it. You know how to do all this stuff. Figure it out.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very, very true. I used to think, engineers knew everything and no, they don't, so it's, they are human, just like the rest of us. So
sometimes they seem superhuman and they are,
right.
But there is still limitations to their all knowingness.
Very much so. And that's a big part of what I like in working in ICS and OT, today. And I think this is not just because of me and my day job, because I get to have a lot of other conversations with, engineers and other folks in automation and OT around the world, but just getting to share with them and help them learn from a cyber perspective, right? How to design or how to secure their environments. But then I also get to learn from them as well. So I'm always constantly learning. I learn so much every day from people, again, from all over the world, that it makes it really exciting. Where I'm an old IT cybersecurity person. I've been doing IT cyber for 30 plus years, right? And it's nothing against the folks in IT cyber. It kind of gets old after a while, though. Well, I guess like everything, but you go to most IT environments, right? They're very similar from environment to environment. Where you step into OT and every environment is completely different. Even if you go into, right? Even you go into two different power plants, right? They can be very different internally, right? From a kind of a control systems and networking perspective, and the different systems and assets that they have and how those processes operate. So it's
you can even see it within a single plant between multiple units where they've done upgrades at different times. Right. They've added third-party controls differently across it because of budgets or needs or whatever. And it's crazy to see, even at the same site, owned by the same company, ran by the same people, the same engineers, right? And there's a difference between block 1 or unit 1 and block 2, unit 2, right? And it's just that level. And usually it's not night and day. It's not going to be GE and, Toshiba, but usually it's GE, but it's different levels of GE. It's, I've upgraded this one 2 years ago and this one's still waiting to be upgraded. So I'm dealing with all these different things, and that sounds simple, but on the scale that we're talking about, it can be really complex to really understand the intricacies of patching and support and how it all works, because that version could change the interconnection between PDH and UD. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can change between those things that are beyond just an operating system that we deal with on the IT side, right?
Right. It can be a lot more complex, and try to keep everything. And when I look at ICS and OT from a cyber perspective, I always try to keep it as simple as possible. But those are definitely some of the areas that can trip people up. They can get complex and they can get complicated because of all those different values and systems that we see out there. Some of our projects, they take 5, 6, 7 years to build. We have an LNG facility that we just started bringing online right now, and we built the first 2 lines. That took 7 years to get done. Right. Of course, COVID was in the middle of that, which didn't help. And now we're about to start work on the next 2 lines, which is going to still take another 4 or 5 years. So there's going to be definitely some small differences, at least between those two, that kind of like you point out, like everybody needs to be aware of, from the engineering side, but also the folks that are leading the cybersecurity at the site.
Which leads us to part of the reason that I wanted to bring you back on this week, is give you an opportunity to talk about this upcoming thing that you guys are doing, which is BSides ICS. It's going to correspond with S4 in Tampa, and it's an independent organization. Everybody's probably heard of BSides, but why don't you give us a little thing of what is BSides and what is BSides ICS, and why are you putting this together?
Sure. Yeah. No. BSides, for those that aren't familiar, it's came out of the IT cybersecurity world, and it was really a couple of folks that they were applying to the larger conferences out in Vegas, like Black Hat and DEF CON, and I think it was primarily DEF CON, and all quality folks, right? Had great talks. Didn't get accepted for the conference, and they said, hey, I'm still really passionate about sharing this information. I really still want to get it out there. So a bunch of folks just met at a bar the day before the main conference, just hung out and talked about what they wanted to share. And BSides was born, and now they have events in, I think it's over 100, nearly 100 countries around the world. I actually run the BSides Greenville event down in Greenville, South Carolina, where I'm at, and we get about 400 folks every year. And it's really, I think, our event, like many of the BSides, it's really just about bringing people together. Mm-hmm. And there's talks. Most have a lockpick village. You might have some other, maybe a capture the flag that somebody's doing, but really, I think BSides is really just focused on the community, right? Bringing the people together and just making those connections with, whether it's somebody that you just talk to for 5 minutes, you might talk to somebody for, the next 5 or 50 years, right? Depending on that connection that you make. And we see a lot of that. There's been, even just with like BSides Greenville, we've seen other security groups and other conferences spin out just out of the BSides Greenville area, where I took mine we started BSides Greenville because I went to the BSides Augusta conference and said, this is awesome. And to me, it's still the best cybersecurity conference on the East Coast, if not in the country, and personally, and I always was trying to get people to go to BSides Augusta from Greenville, because it's a 2-hour drive.
Sure.
I could only get like less than a handful of people to go, though. So I realized the only way to get Greenville people to BSides is to bring BSides to Greenville. And that's actually somewhat the same approach with BSides ICS OT, because we did add some OT content to BSides Greenville this year, and it was really well accepted. I think we had as many folks in the OT talks as we did in the IT talks, which was really exciting to see, because we had some folks that had been in the field for a little while, and then but we had a lot of people that have no clue what ICS or OT is, and they wanted to learn. And so that was really exciting to see. And so when we look at, we have S4 conference, and this is, I've applied to speak at S4, and the last couple of years it's been, nice try. And Dale, who, Peterson, who runs the conference, right? He's actually, I'm really impressed, because he gets back to everybody really quickly.
He does.
And he tries to work with you and say like, hey, we can tweak this, or, maybe, it'll be a good fit, or maybe next year. Like, I think my topic, just, wasn't going to be a good fit for S4. And so it kind of made me think, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how like BSides started. It was just like, you had these guys that, had wanted to speak at a conference, and they just wanted to get together. And it's like, we should do the same thing, just in, with S4. Right. Because with S4, you really do have like the expert and thought leaders of, globally coming to arguably the most important, largest ICS OT cybersecurity conference that there is. And it's like, well, everybody's coming, but we also want to, kind of help grow the community and bring new people in, and also make it not only more accessible for new folks, but also for asset owners and operators, right? The people that own these environments or that run these plants, right? You can't go to S4 and get a lot of real world practical information that you can take back to the plant the next day and help secure or run the environment, right? That's just not going to happen. And I talk with a lot of owners and operators these days. And so that's really kind of this idea behind BSides ICS, is bringing in the community, to kind of tapping in S4, right? Because we have all the experts in town, and then, but also bringing in new people to get them exposed to some of the, not only these experts, but just people that work in the field as well. And anybody that wants to, share, and then also make it very practical and approachable for asset owners and operators.
Yeah.
And it's a $30 ticket, right? Compared to, over $2,000, right? For S4 right now for 3 days. So it makes it much more approachable. Right. I think, and making it, affordable, and making it so people can come and learn more about ICS and OT cyber.
Well, it's one of those things where, BSides does not take away, because BSides, they do these they correspond with DEF CON and Black Hat and RSA and all these big conferences have these BSides, and it doesn't take away from it. It's not to take away from the main conferences.
Right. If anything, it's the opposite. Because you'll have people that end up going to both. So, ideally, if, we're able to continue doing BSides ICS, because we actually had to get special permission from BSides to be able to do a, specific conference focused on one topic.
Yeah.
Right? And because that's not something that they've done. They've done like 3 or 4 out of their entire history, and those were one-off events.
Sure.
And so, yeah, being able to, have folks at both S4 and BSides ICS and kind of going back and forth. And you have a lot of people today that might come to the first BSides ICS and they're just starting to learn, but maybe in a couple years, right, you do see them at S4 because they're ready to make that jump, and then they can come back and also get back to the community.
Well, and it's you and I have talked a lot, and we have similar aspirations. Like the reason I launched this podcast, the reason you do your YouTube training, the reason you do your stuff on LinkedIn, the reason I do. Obviously, we have personal reasons from building our own brand, obviously, but that only matters if we're providing content and value, right? Our intention is to grow the network, right? To have different, I've been doing this a long time. You've been doing this a long time. At the same time, I don't think that my ideas are always the best. Believe it or not, like I've been wrong before. It doesn't happen that often, but it's happened, right? But it's not about being wrong or anything like that, right? It's about bringing more people into the industry, right? We know cybersecurity is not going anywhere. We know the importance of ICS and really having that understanding. So whether you're coming out of college, you're still in high school, you're trying to figure out what you want, or you've been in IT like both Mike and I were for many years, and you're wanting to bridge that gap from IT to OT, and it's a hard transition. But it's not undoable, right? I've done it. You've done it. Many of us came from other worlds because there was no such thing as OT cybersecurity. So it's not like anybody has 40 years experience doing OT cybersecurity, because it just wasn't called that. Now, granted, we have, because we were working in this industry kind of adjacent. It just wasn't called that, right? So all of these things, the entire intention is to bring more visibility, more understanding, to be open so that we're having diversity of thought and having more people's opinion. And to your point, Dale has to be really intentional about who gets on the S4 stage, because everybody wants to be there, right? So he has to really be picky on who's there and does it fit with the theme, and are they good on stage and all those types of things, because everybody expects that higher level of thing. Whereas at a BSides, not to take anything away from BSides, but you can have people that have never talked on stage before get up there, and that's okay. Like that's the benefit and the value there is that no matter where you are in your career, you can present at BSides, which is a great opportunity for you and the community, because we get to hear your idea. Even if it's not polished enough to be main stage S4, doesn't mean that there's not good value in it.
Right. Exactly. And that's, I think, with the schedule we're looking at putting together, that we want to make sure that there is that kind of diversity across the board, right? It's not going to be, the typical like old white guys, right? like myself, just speaking for myself, right? But also with a large focus on, a big focus for me is bringing more women and other underrepresented groups into the community, for sure. Yep. And so and then also with BSides, and we have slots for new speakers, right? Someone that hasn't actually shared. That's actually one thing that we ask on the forum is, have you presented this before? And like an S4, they probably are looking for somebody that has presented, before. In some respects, right? We're kind of the opposite. We want those new folks that are really passionate about sharing their message and want to get it out there.
Yep. Yeah, and we know, and to dive back into some of the content, so we know the value and the vast difference between IT and OT, right? And we know you posted something the other day that really triggered people, and I think is still a valuable conversation. Active Directory, right? So we look at Active Directory. Active Directory is a good thing. I've got some horror stories and war stories about using Active Directory. I was an Active Directory administrator at AT&T and on the IT side, right? Supporting 100,000 plus users and, Active Directory and Exchange and all those types of things. But those capabilities have got brought into these OT spaces, right? And we don't, that control engineer we just talked about before is not an Active Directory admin. So they're just taking whatever configuration came from the vendor and they're hoping it worked, right? And we see a lot of organizations that are trying to make trust relationships, or instead of having a separate Active Directory, they just integrate with their IT one, because I can understand at a high level how it makes sense in their mind, because it's more difficult to manage multiple environments and and again, that control engineer is not an Active Directory admin. He doesn't know how to really manage it from that level, but there's all sorts of risks that come with that. So talk to me about how you feel about Active Directory at OT and the whole ITOT convergence thing.
Sure. Yeah. This is coming from somebody like yourself. I've been doing Active Directory since it was first a thing, right? 1998 and,
Right.
1999 was when it started really picking up out of beta. And then of course, when Windows 2000, officially launched, I helped design Active Directory for the Naval Marine Corps intranet, which was not, a small environment,
Sure.
right? When you're talking the entire Navy and the entire Marine Corps. And then just carrying that forth. So yeah, there's this idea. And I think a lot of people, if you're new to ICS OT, you don't realize this is something I had no clue before I stepped foot in my first plant, was there's Windows everywhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And the plant manager was giving me a tour and he's like, oh, here's all of our, data historians, they're running Windows and Microsoft SQL Server. And here's our Active Directory domain controllers. Domain controller. Well, shoot, like I know Active Directory. So, it's definitely something that I could even bring more to the table to help them with and help them understand. Cause like you said, they don't have that background. But, when you look at Active Directory, it is a great tool, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to put user accounts and passwords and be able to use group policies to push out security and other settings across, the environment and be able to administer systems, right? Especially in, the larger the environment, the more benefit you get out of it. The problem, is when you have your IT Active Directory and then let's say you have your manufacturing facility and they also have, of course, again, all those Windows systems in the plant. And so, we want to manage those as well with user accounts and passwords and group policies for all of our settings. So I think the initial instinct is, and mine would be, 15 plus years ago would be, let's just tie them all together, right? That's the beauty of AD. Like I can do everything from one central location. The problem that you run into is, think if an attacker or something like ransomware gets into the IT environment, really, especially with ransomware today, right? It just spreads like wildfire, right? From system to system, instantaneously, everything is compromised. If you have that connection between IT AD and the OT environment, that infection, right, that ransomware, or if it's just an attacker, right, they're just going to move from IT right into OT and take out or compromise all of the systems. And I hear about it. It's almost like I get somebody at least on a weekly, basis talking about, that happened to us. Right. And they had to learn the lesson the hard way. So a big part of that post is so hopefully people, if they're designing in a new environment, right, hopefully you don't have to learn things the hard way. And if you have an older environment that's sharing AD, and I kind of get a sense that it's probably about 20% of the environments out there. I don't know what you've seen, but that's kind of what at least from my exposure, a lot of folks still have it. And I think they're just, okay, it's just like I'm from California, right? And the wildfires are crazy, right? So you're always worried about it. It just feels like the same type of, situation where you're just sitting on massive acres and acres of just dry weeds and brush. And it's just waiting for a spark for everything to ignite and go up. And that's what it feels like to me. They're just waiting for that one person to click on a link or open up an attachment, infect their system, and then that ransomware is off to the races and it takes out, again, IT and OT.
Right.
And then your operations are completely down.
Well, we've done this in business where we have, delegation of authority, right? We have, we separate so that, my IT administrator can't write a check. My finance people can't see, everything. Not one person has that full rights. I've also seen a lot of operational reasons why segmentation and having separate systems. And it's exactly the things that you talked about, right? It's, hey, IT is rolling out this new group policy because it's better security to make sure that all the screens are locked within 5 minutes of inactivity. Right. And this was a disconnected environment where the actual OT systems were not sharing Active Directory, but they had what do all plants use? Pi. And usually those Pi systems are many times sitting on a corporate desktop because it's just displaying information, right? It's not control. Right. It doesn't need to be in the technically OT environment. But as we all know, it's really hard for a plant to manage their environment because they put so much into Pi. It's half the dang screens in the control room is some kind of Pi manipulation, right? Yeah, so for sure. The IT side implemented this new group policy that dropped these corporate machines into this thing. So the screen locked after 5 minutes. The operators don't have a login. It's just a screen. It has no keyboard. Like there is a keyboard, but it's like hidden somewhere else. They never log into it. They've never once logged into it. So when the screen went dark, they can't control it and they have no idea how to get to it. Right. And so once they finally got to it and then it happened again, then they're screaming like, what is going on? Yeah. IT didn't know they were doing this. They didn't know the impact, but that's the bigger problem. That's the thing that we have to understand is it's not just, yes, the ransomware thing is huge. And yes, being able to pivot down in these environments with one login that could then with a trust relationship or anything else, then I have access into these OT spaces. It's also somebody can make a mistake in IT or push something they think is a good idea. And it's not on paper. It is, but it doesn't work in the OT environment for many number of reasons. Like for instance, I don't want my operator to have to log into a screen ever because they need to be able to control that thing for sure at a heartbeat, right? I control access differently in a control room than I do on a machine that's sitting out in the middle of somewhere else, right? I need that access instantly. No hesitation. I don't want them to fumble with a password, no fingerprint. It's just there. They sit in the chair, they control the thing, right? Yep.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Very true. And I think it's one of those big differences, just between IT and OT. And that's why, it's just kind of one of those reasons they are very different. And so, we don't need IT AD and OT AD connected together. The biggest argument to that is, well, now I have to manage IT AD and I have to manage OT and AD. I'm like, yes, you do. But you've reduced the risk that's there substantially.
Sure.
Right. And I don't know. I've administered AD in really large environments. It's not that hard and it doesn't take that many resources. And once you set it up in OT, right? OT is just very static. It's not like you're getting into AD every day, making changes all day. It's, I just don't see that as a valid argument. I get it as a concern. Yeah. Completely. Right. I think it's one that it's not insurmountable at all.
No, I agree. And that's the bigger thing to always remember is yes, you have to manage all these different environments, but you're also not managing the environment very often. Like we're not getting new accounts constantly. We're not installing things. Nobody's browsing the internet. Like once it's set, like most of these environments don't change for years. I mean, usually don't even have people coming in and out. Yeah. I mean, you're doing an annual review to make sure people change their password, like basic things, but you're not installing new things. You're not adding new devices. Nobody's plugging in or unplugging. Nobody's installing new applications on things. Like it's very, very static. Sun Tzu Art of War, things don't change and they're not updated constantly. So that's an issue. But on the inverse, then I should be able to notice when things change, right? So it's very simple. Once I set up Active Directory, and the argument I always come back with is this. It's, no, I don't want you to have one environment. Yes, I think you should allow IT to advise to make sure that the Active Directory environment is set up correctly. And what that means is not to push all the IT policies down into OT. It just means they don't have a default password. They don't have the standard things that should be taken care of and secured and made sure it's configured to best practices. You should lean on your IT team that does Active Directory for a living. They do this at very large organizations and very large environments. You should have them come and look at your environment. Just because the vendor set it up does not mean they're an Active Directory expert. I hate to tell you, but they're not. So
No.
have some outside third party review of that and make sure that they didn't leave a back door or, enable something, for instance, like you should never log in as domain admin ever, ever, ever to anything other than a domain controller. Like, and many times when these vendors give you their service account, that service account is enterprise admin and schema admin and domain admin.
Of course, right.
And you're logging into all these machines with all those things. And we know that there's a Kerberos issue and all sorts of ways that can be taken advantage of because you're just using it improperly.
Yeah, right. If you have an attacker in the environment, they're just sitting there waiting for somebody to log in with those credentials, and they take them and they're off to the races.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be a state adversary. We see state adversaries in many of our environments, or at least they're trying to get into our environments, right? And they're very much after Fluor in my day job because they don't care about our data, but they do want Shell's data, or BP's or Saudi Aramco's. But it's also ransomware, and the common attackers and the hacktivists as well use all the same tactics and techniques, right? The little tricks, they'll just sit there, same thing, right? They'll just sit there and wait for one of those accounts that has massive, godlike privileges essentially in the environment, and it's off to the races, and they just take control over everything.
Yep. And it happens so easily. And this gets back to, CIE and cyber informed engineering and really looking at all these systems and really understanding what they're supposed to be and making sure you have the right team and all that. Right. And this goes back to the whole theme of this, ICS and BSides is really making sure that people are informed and trained. There's no way that you would know why because it's very easy to say, no, you could never do that in OT. Without explaining, right? And why the battle scars I've seen personally firsthand that Active Directory literally tripped a working power plant because they lost access, right? And it was done by a vendor. Long story, and I've said it before, but people coming into the environment don't understand because they haven't seen those things. So having them sit down and let me explain to them why, and I'm not saying you can't ever do it. I'm just explaining the difficulties that I've experienced and why I say no and why I say segmentation is important and why I've been burned by this way and this way and this way and this way. And these are the concerns that we have because at the end of the day, in an OT environment, safety and availability is the most important thing. It trumps all the other CIA triad, right? It's not even a close second. It is availability 100% of the time. So as long as I can safely operate it and continue it, if I never had Active Directory, like all these plant managers would throw all this crap out if they could just run their plant safely, right? And obviously we need these things because it makes it more efficient, blah, 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 all the things, right? But at the end of the day, many of the cyber things that we do, we struggle to find the ROI on it. And sometimes you have to look on the inverse of, if I implement this thing, I can actually make it less available. I can actually make it less reliable because of things like this. And it's a once in a lifetime thing, but I've seen it multiple times. So it's not a once in a lifetime thing. It can happen. It's not just me. Ask other people. There's a reason why people are so scared of scanning, OT networks. It's not because vendors have told them that. It's because somebody scanned and it caused a problem. Like it's not a fear. It's not an unrealistic fear. Let's put it that way.
For sure. Yeah. I actually had an industrial CISO one time tell me, in his environment, he's like, if you scan that PLC with Nmap, and he very serious, dead serious. He's like, it will leave a crater in the ground 3 miles wide.
Right.
Like, I probably won't be doing active scanning in this environment, right? But I can, think back to, me, 15 years ago, it's like, oh, I'll come in and I'll run Nmap and I'll run Nessus, right, to find vulnerabilities and map out your network. And that's not how it works in OT. But that just points to, how there are a lot of similarities between IT and OT cybersecurity, right? They're more similar than they're not. But when they're different, that's where we have to help folks from IT understand those differences. While also IT is helping, kind of like the example with AD, right? Helping out the OT folks understand, okay, well, how do we secure, AD, right? How do we use it to secure the environment, right? And that really speaks to how we get IT and OT to work together, right? And I think that's also a big, going back to like BSides ICS, it's this idea of being able to bring IT and OT people together. My goal is hopefully we have, half of the group is IT folks and half is OT folks.
Yeah.
And that we find a way to, meet in the middle and work together. Because the biggest thing that my biggest pet peeve is when people say like IT cybersecurity is not OT cybersecurity. And I get the idea behind it, just like we're saying, they're very different in many ways. But again, to me, they have more in common than they don't.
I agree.
And it shouldn't be the IT side of the house and the OT side of the house. It's the same damn house that we're trying to protect.
Yeah.
And we need to work together to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think awareness and education and bringing people together is the only way that we can get past, all these problems we see out there.
Yeah, 100%. It's, the way I've said it before is like, we're on the same team. We're in the same jersey. Like, yes, you're IT and you have a different job than I do as an OT person, but that we're on the same team and we should be working together to secure this thing and make it more available and efficient and have the ROI and all the things. So we should use, if you've got a guy in the corner that's the best firewall guy in the business, why aren't you using him? I'm not saying that he should control your firewalls, but you should at least advise from him. You should at least get his opinion because he is good at what he does. You still get to make the final decision, but you should at least get his opinion, right? Same thing on Active Directory, same thing on SQL, same thing on, thin clients. We're using thin clients in all these control rooms and, with the terminal server, like we have the same systems running in IT. Why are we not? And we're sending that team to training and they're dedicated and all they do all day long is eat, breathe, sleep, networking or firewalls or front end servers or whatever the thing. And the fact that we're not all using those to at least advise on our OT environments as they're being deployed. Okay. The vendor's bringing in, Active Directory and they're bringing in XYZ firewall and they're bringing in, these types of switches and they're bringing in this and here's the configurations. Is there anything that we're missing? Like, as we know, sometimes those configurations will leave, telnet running and, they've got a standard password installed and, they're not encrypting the passwords on a Cisco iOS, right? It's just clear text so I can look at the configuration, see what the password is. I mean, they leave SNMP running, like all the different things that on an IT side, we've disabled 15 years ago. On an OT side, many times we walk in and it's still there. It's running XP. Right. It's got a 3G card directly plugged into it. It's multi-home. So it's plugged into multiple networks. So it's bypassing the firewall. There's all these things that we do in OT that are just no-nos in IT, but we do them every day in OT. And we have we've got to get to a place where we feel comfortable to reach out to our team on the other side of the fence. Because we're, like you said, we're all under the same house. Like we're all working towards the same goal. And the more that we can use that knowledge together for a shared end goal, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
For sure. Yeah. Do we need people that understand both? For sure.
Yeah.
Right. But to get to that point, it takes years. It takes decades for somebody. Like I'm working on that path and I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm still not an expert, and I would never say I'm an expert in ICS or OT, anything.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
And I'm learning, again, more than one thing, every day.
Sure.
So we have to work together until there's that time where sure you have, and I don't think it'll actually ever happen, where you just have a field of people that understand, IT and OT together. And it's, again, I think those people are going to be rare and few between.
Sure.
And I think that's always going to be the case. Right.
Well, it's like, you build a house, you hire a general contractor, and then that general contractor gets subcontractors. He gets an electrician, he gets a plumber, he gets a foundation guy, he gets a cabinet guy, he gets a, paint and mud guy, like, all that type of stuff. Yes, he's somewhat knowledgeable in all of those different areas, enough to say, hey, subcontractor, that's not the quality of work that we're doing. That's not what we're trying to do. But at the same time, you don't want him doing all the work in those areas because he's not a craftsman. He's not an expert in all of those areas, but you don't need him to be. You need him to be able to understand enough that he can say, hey, electrician, we're not using aluminum wiring in this house. Like, I don't care how cheap it is. I'm not doing aluminum, right? And we're going to put it into code, and here's the code and all that stuff, right? It's no different in OT and cyber and in our enterprises. We need to have somebody at that top level that has the enough understanding, like you and I, that aren't necessarily experts in all these things, but we've been around and we've seen enough that we can say, hey, you're missing something there, or no, that's not how we're going to do this. IT, we are not pushing GPOs down into these products and locking their screens because it's going to cause a problem. This is why, right? And it's the battle scars from my hard hats up there that, I've been there. I've seen it, and we've done it, and pulling together and learning that root cause analysis, the after action, whatever you want to call it, is so valuable, that knowledge being pushed into BSides. So what are some of the things that you guys are going to be talking on? Like, is there a theme or focus on the event other than just ICS in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's one with BSides, it's kind of like you build it and they will come type of, especially for the first one. But, already talking with folks that want to participate, to come share. We have our keynote speaker locked in. We can't announce quite yet, but I'm really, really excited. Hopefully a lot of other people will be as well. I know we'll be touching on subjects like, and I think there's a couple of ways to look at it, because with ICS OT, right, there's kind of the cybersecurity, I guess, principles or practices. Like, if you want to learn about like ICS OT pen testing, right, how does that work in an OT environment and how it's different from IT, right? That could be an example. But then at the same time, we also look at the OT world and from a perspective of different sectors as well. So you could have somebody come in and talk about, like, how does the power grid work, right? How does control systems and cybersecurity work in a power plant, right? Versus, someone like we're talking about, Kristen, right? Come in and talking about how cybersecurity impacts food and agriculture.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not, it's one of those areas I didn't think about a lot, because I don't, I haven't worked in food and agriculture. Right. So it's kind of this whole, just bringing in different people that want to come share, from first time speakers to people that have probably been doing this for 30 plus years and everything in between. And they can be talking about cyber from different perspectives, from the different sectors. They can be looking at it from, these are the different practices in OT, how they are different in IT, and just kind of a big mishmash, right, or mashup of all that is typically what BSides will turn out to be.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, definitely anybody that's out there listening, maybe you've submitted something for S4, you didn't get your talk heard, or maybe you did and you still want to share with more folks. Like, definitely reach out. I'll be part of it, definitely volunteering and helping out where I can. There's some cool stuff coming that, when they are announced, I think everybody will be, excited to see. I know you guys are still working on the venue. Hopefully that's found out pretty quick as well, but it'll be somewhere in that S4 area, that I'm sure that people will be, if you're going to one, you'll be able to get there from the other. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the furthest location we're looking at, and we should have it locked in hopefully by the end of the year, or at the end of the month, right after Thanksgiving. I'm going to go down there. But yeah, I think the furthest away is like a 10-minute drive from where S4 is. So it's perfect. Yeah, not horrible.
So how do folks submit to be a talk or sponsor or volunteer? Like, what's the kind of call to action for folks as if they want to be involved or just participate or just attend even?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So BSides ICS.org is the site to go to, and then you'll see the links. There's links there for the CFP and for tickets. I would say right now we're actually probably already about 20% sold out, which is really awesome. Good. To see. So we'll have a great group. And then on the site, you'll also see the info at BSides So that's the best email for if you want to go through the official channels, or anybody can feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or send me an email at mike@mikeholcomb.com.
Sure.
And we'll give, folks want to volunteer, we'll get you on the list. We've already got like yourself and some others from the community, which is really exciting, that are coming to help out for the day. And then trying to think what else. I'm probably missing something, but it should be a great event. We'll have a speaker dinner and volunteer dinner the night before. We're planning on an after party that night. We're also working with Kristen and Najo to host a reception for women in ICS cybersecurity that night. It was something that S4 had done previously, and they're not doing it this year for whatever reason. So we were going to pick that up. So I think that's definitely something also to look forward to, especially for any of the women, whether you come to S4 or BSides or,
Sure.
or one or the other or both. Definitely love to have you at the reception that night. So
absolutely. That's exciting. Yeah. And all this stuff, we'll share all the links and content down in the show notes there, but definitely reach out. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, reach out to Mike directly. Happy to do it. But I really challenge all the listeners out there, if you haven't spoken, if you've got something and you want to get in there and submit something, maybe you've tried at S4, DEF CON, or any of the others, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you've been sitting on the sidelines and you haven't stepped up to stage. I really challenge you to take this, right? And it's a good opportunity. It's a good skill. Mike and I talked about it a little earlier around, kind of business development versus engineering. And, part of my job as a consultant is to do, to sell. Right. And one of my mentors a long time ago told me all business is a people business, right? You have to be able to sell your idea to people, whether you're a true salesman. People think sales and they think car salesman, but it's really, all of us are always selling to our wives, to our kids, to our boss, to our, the plant manager. You're constantly selling your idea and why it's a valuable idea and how you understand and how it's going to benefit them. Like that. That's what we're doing. Right. So getting on stage and honing that soft skill is valuable to all of us engineers, all of us network people, cyber people. Like that's a skill set that isn't necessarily trained at a CISSP or anything like that, but it's a valuable skill to have for your career and to just better the community in general, to have those dialogues and conversations. Because, Mike, some people may disagree with you and I on the whole segmentation and IT/OT convergence, and I'm happy to sit down and talk to them about it and just talk about my concerns, but that doesn't mean I'm against hearing their perspective as well.
For sure. Yeah, most absolutely.
Definitely. So when's the deadline? When do tickets, like how often or how quickly do people need to jump before they lose the opportunity to attend?
Yeah, it's hard, to know since it's our first year as far as tickets selling out. I suspect we will sell out though, especially once we, release our keynote speaker. But we're going to try and get as many folks in there as possible. So we'll sell tickets up to the day, but again, they probably, I would imagine, are going to sell out. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then the cutoff for the call for paper or presentations is the end of the year. So you have until New Year's to get that in, and then we'll have a really quick turnaround where the advisory board looks through those. They don't know who submits what, so it's a blind review, and then take all that into consideration. And then we'll finalize the schedule and let folks know, so that way for those that are especially coming from out of town to Tampa this year, that they'll have time to be able to make those arrangements.
Awesome. That's awesome. Anything else you want to share with everybody to know before we wrap it up and tell people to just sign up and let's go?
Yeah, I mean, that's really it, right? We want to make it as big as possible because we don't want this to be the one and only BSides ICS. We've already had folks reach out from the UK and India and a couple other places that they want to do their own version, which is awesome. And which is what we want to have happen. We just have to make the first one a success so that the BSides overall community supports us continuing with this, BSides ICS OT in name. which
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are really excited about. And even though maybe they don't care about ICS OT, and that's okay, not everybody does, I think at the same time they can see the value in
Sure.
the mission and support that. So there's a lot of excited people out there. And so I'm really excited for February to come and put on a really great show, have as many people there, again, sharing, connecting, learning, just getting to know each other and kind of take that back out into the real world and make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting, man. Well, definitely have all those show notes. I'm excited to be there, be part of it, and experience the first one and help it be as successful as possible. So thank you for your time today, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to February and kicking this thing off.
For sure. Yeah, it'd be great to have you there. For sure.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.